Representative Hageman, how are you this morning?
I am wonderful. How are you, David?
We're doing great, man. The program's moving along, and I'm excited that you could call in. So
thank you for having me.
Well, of course, there's a serious issue that's been burning my phone up anyway, and that's this whole idea of selling off public land to private entities. And apparently, according to one caller I had, why do you want to sell off the entire Bighorn National Forest, Harriet? Why would you do that to us?
Well, I won't. So we've solved that one. Just like the No Kings Day, we have as many kings today that we had last week. So obviously the No Kings protests were highly successful, right?
Well, they were. And I'm eternally grateful for them.
So that isn't the purpose of this. I would encourage people to read the bill. Go to my Facebook page. The current version of the bill is linked right there. I'm not saying that's the final version of the bill. It is the one that I have. And I'm just going to walk through some of the provisions. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. First of all, this covers lands that are managed by the BLM and the National Forest Service. It excludes all of your, quote, federally protected land. What does that mean? It would not include national monuments, national recreation areas, wilderness areas, national wild and scenic rivers, national trails, national parks, wildlife refuges, national fish hatcheries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It also excludes those lands that are covered by existing leases, grazing leases, oil and gas leases, ski areas. Those would not be included in these lands. The lands that would be prioritized are specifically identified in the bill, at least the version I have. They would be those lands that are nominated by states or units of local government, adjacent to existing development, have access to existing infrastructure, suitable for residential housing, reduced checkerboard land patterns, or for those isolated tracts that we have in Wyoming and elsewhere. So here's the point of this, that this is a very narrowly tailored bill to focus on a specific challenge that we have in the Western United States. It also only covers 11 states. But I know many of your listeners have been to Las Vegas. And when you go to Las Vegas, you see fairly large tracts of land in the downtown area that are entirely undeveloped. And I've always thought that was so odd that they had these huge tracts of land that had no development. And there's blow dirt and trash, and they're surrounded by chain link fences and that sort of thing. A lot of those lots are owned by the BLM. Right. I didn't know that. But some of the city council members of Las Vegas came to visit me earlier this year to talk about the challenge that they have. So those lands are owned by BLM. Nobody's hunting on those lands. Nobody's hiking on those lands or fishing. Nobody's out there camping on those lands. The BLM doesn't want these lands. They're not equipped to manage lands in urban areas. It makes absolutely no sense. So those are the kinds of lands that would be targeted for with this kind of a bill. Another one is in Wyoming, specific to Wyoming. Kemmerer, the mayor of Kemmerer actually contacted us even before this bill was put out there for consideration. Kemmerer has a terrible time with affordable housing, with having enough housing, and there's a ton of stuff going on in southwestern, and Wyoming, and they can't provide housing. One of the reasons why? Because they're surrounded by BLM lands. So that, again, would be one of the areas that would be targeted for this kind of development, where maybe between the local community, the state, the BLM, they could identify a 10-acre parcel or 15-acre parcel or 3-acre parcel that is suitable for constructing of housing. And that's the process that would be followed. It specifically requires state involvement, local community involvement, Indian tribe involvement. So all of the groups, the interested groups, would come together and identify those tracts that would be subject to this particular bill. Which brings me to another point that needs to be made, and that is that there are maps that are out there floating around. None of those maps have anything to do with this bill. None of this, the very purpose of this bill is to create the maps to identify these tracts. Those maps are existing RMP maps that are identified. In other words, like the Rock Springs RMP that we've been talking about over the last year or so. The Rock Springs RMP was issued by the Biden BLM under Biden's administration, Tracy Stone Manning, the current head of the Wilderness Society, one of the organizations that's putting out a lot of misinformation on the Lee bill, Tracy Stone Manning was the head of the BLM at the time. Guess how many acres she designated for disposal in the Rock Springs RMP? Tracy Stone Manning, the head of the Wilderness Society, who's now pulling her hair out and screaming and saying, please send us money. They're trying to sell all of our lands. She identified 48,000 acres within the Rock Springs district alone for disposal. Tracy Stone Manning, the head of the Wilderness Society. So all of this is about fundraising. If you go to the bottom of their emails, you go to their propaganda sheets, and they say things like, please send us money. We have to protect our federal lands from the nasty Trump administration, blah, 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 blah. It's all about raising funding. This is propaganda, and they're lying about what the Lee bill does.
Well, and that's what they do. And it's, it's amazing how effective it was, because I think I saw that map. It popped up maybe day before yesterday. Maybe a day or two before, and it's immediately my phone lit up. And, it's what I kept telling people is, do your own research. And even one guy, try as I might, I couldn't get him calmed down. So I said, well, why don't you contact Harriet, Representative Hageman's office? By the way, here's their phone number. And, ask her. And so I thought, well, I'll see if I can get you on the program so we can talk about this, because it's a classic move of the left. You create a crisis and then use that crisis to raise money off of, and, lie as much as you can while you're doing it.
And what is frustrating to me is this is an issue that we need to resolve. We need to use common sense. One of the big questions I always get is, how do we keep our young people in our community? How do we develop manufacturing? How do we create new businesses? How do we expand opportunities? How do we do blah, blah, all of these things? Those are all legitimate questions. But then we try to find a solution to make sure that we can do that we can bring manufacturing into these communities, that we can build new infrastructure, that we do have the skilled laborers available to fill those jobs. And their first reaction was, well, but you're not going to take that 1 acre outside of Powell.
Right, exactly right.
You're not going to take that 10-acre lot in the middle of Las Vegas. We want you to expand outward rather than do an infill. This is the kind of thing this is a very common sense approach to an issue that all of us should agree on. The federal government owns 640 million acres. This bill targets less than 1%, not even of the 640 million, less than 1% of National Forest Service lands and less than 1% of BLM lands. National Forest Service lands are 192 million acres. And it specifically targets those lands that are ripe or that are appropriate for housing and urban development. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There is no reason that the organic legislation that created the BLM or the Forest Service would prohibit this. This is exactly what any rational government, any rational body politic would do. They would look at these resources and say, how best can they be used for the benefits of our citizens? That's why I am surprised at this absolute hysteria over this. But the moment I have a chance to talk to people or they read the bill, again, they're like, oh, well, that actually makes sense.
Yes. Well, the one question that I had is, in Wyoming, we refer to the problem of the checkerboard, that the federal,
Yes.
state, and private land is checkerboarded all over the place. But it's not necessarily just a section here, a section there. There's all sorts of smaller, little tiny chunks of federal land that are interspersed, sometimes in the middle of private land. So will this bill target those smaller parcels that really it doesn't make any sense that there's federal land in there? I mean, is part of the intent to clear that up?
It potentially could, although I don't think that would be the best use of this particular legislation, because this really is focused more on community development and affordable housing, not low-income housing, but affordable housing. And what I mean by that is this will really target those areas where we've got a challenge for Kemmerer being able to expand and provide affordable housing for their workers, for the workers there. The kinds of lands that you're talking about are the very ones that Tracy Stone Manning, as the head of the BLM, most likely identified for disposal. That's why they are identified for disposal. They're isolated. Nobody can access them. So I recently met with the head of the BLM in Buffalo. Absolutely fabulous man. I really enjoyed my conversation. He showed me a map that he had been putting together where he's identifying parcels for trade and for this very reason. You know, we can trade 37 acres over here. That makes it so that this guy is whole, and then we get this 37 acres over here, and that's contiguous to a 3,000 acre BLM parcel that already exists. Those are the kinds of, that's the kind of flexibility. That's the kind of thing that we ought to be thinking about and doing with these resources is how do we consolidate the BLM's lands? How do we consolidate private property? How do we minimize trespass problems? How do we better manage these resources for the benefit of the American people? And so that's what I'm always looking for. The idea that I'm going to sell off the Bighorn National Forest or Bridger Teton is so absurd on its face that anybody who makes that accusation should maybe, you know, go outside and touch grass or something, because there's something fundamentally wrong with them.
Well, I think a lot of this hysteria was ginned up with folks who are outfitters, you know, outdoors people. And there's a pretty good sized group, network in Wyoming of, you know, different outdoor recreation, hunting, fishing type of groups. And interestingly enough, most people don't know that they're run by the left in Wyoming. And so they were pretty crafty at pushing this map out through all of those, through their network of so-called conservation groups. And it, you know, the speed at which they were able to do it kind of impressed me. I mean, it was impressive.
But it also tells you that how disingenuous they're being.
Oh, yeah.
Because they know those maps, and if are not related to this Lee bill, but they don't even imply that they are. They say that they are. So if you go to the Cowboy State Daily article from 2 days ago, I was interviewed that, and I explained this to the gentleman who wrote that article, and he did a really nice job explaining it. But then you go to some of the representatives of these organizations you're talking about, and they're like, well, yeah, that's what she's saying is true, but it's possible that they might at some point look at this. Well, how about if we all just use common sense?
Exactly right.
And if we're looking at a parcel out in the middle of the red desert, which we never would, because that's no longer going to be affordable housing, because then we have to build the infrastructure to be able to do it, and then it's no longer affordable. But how about if we use common sense and recognize that this entire process only goes forward with state and local community involvement? So every one of these organizations that are talking about, that are screaming right now, if they want to come in and say, well, you can't sell the entire Bighorn Forest, they're going to be sitting right there at the table saying, you can't sell the entire Bighorn Forest. And then those of us with common sense and understanding what the purpose of this bill is, we're going to say, oh, you're right. That was never the intent. We're not trying to.
Right. Well, I mean, go ahead.
But they don't want to have that discussion. They want to generate revenue and raise money and generate hysteria.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, the whole point is to create disruption with, you know, this part of Trump's agenda. I mean, they really don't. A lot of these groups really don't have any. They don't care about your average everyday outfitter in, you know, Gillette, Wyoming. Or Sheridan or Buffalo or anywhere else. I mean, it really is just an attempt to create disruption and raise money for their own Democratic candidates. I mean, to give people something to campaign on.
That's exactly right. And, you know, I think we ought to try to get Tracy Stone Manning on the record and chastise her for the fact that in the Rock Springs RMP, she actually identified about 1.3% of the lands within the Rock Springs district for disposal, and they were the ones that were not necessarily next to urban areas. So maybe Tracy Stone Manning ought to have to answer for her decision in the Rock Springs RMP to sell off our federal lands. What do you think?
I think that's a fantastic idea. Anytime you could get that woman around and grill her. I mean, and one of my favorite videos is you having we'll just say a conversation with her. I mean, it's absolutely great. So Harriet, while I've got you on the phone, what else is going on with the big, beautiful bill that we need to talk about? I know you and I visited about it in our earlier interview, but is there anything else that we need to talk about?
Well, it's making its way through the various Senate committees, just like it did in the House. We're reviewing it every day, changes and language that is coming out from the committees, making sure that our priorities are still included. Our priorities continue primarily relate to making sure that we can unleash our energy industry, that we can address the immigration situation, protect our border, and make sure that we're reducing spending. Out of the House bill, we're reducing spending by $1.6 trillion. I also want to make sure that we are protecting Medicaid for the state of Wyoming. That's why we never expanded Medicaid, which was the smart
Thank
thing to
God.
do, and making sure that we're able to protect our folks who are on Medicaid, making sure that the tax cuts and the tax relief in this bill stay intact. So far, all of those things are there. We're getting rid of the endangerment finding things that I previously talked about. So far, we're doing pretty good. There are some changes, and I know there are going to be some back and forth, knockdown, dragouts between the House and Senate. That's just the way that the system works. I am hoping that we're on track to have a bill in July for the president's signature.
Excellent. I was really happy to see that the Senate included the short-barreled rifles in their, in the NFA portion. Hey, quick question: why wasn't the short-barreled rifles included in the House version of the bill? Was it just an afterthought, or?
I don't know the answer to that. We did include the silencers.
Right. The suppressors.
Yeah, the ear protection. Yeah, the suppressors. I'm sorry, the ear protectors. Yeah, we did include that. I don't know the answer to that.
Well,
I don't know the answer to that.
It's kind of one of those. I don't think we should look a gift horse in the mouth. It's in the bill now, so I say we just go with it. Well,
Yeah.
Well, Harriet, I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're traveling around, and so thank you very much for calling in on Open Line Friday. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good afternoon, Harriet. Bye-bye.
You as well. Bye.